The Bruins are down to 2 guys for their head coaching vacancy. At least that's what Elliot Friedman, Pierre LeBrun have both said. Who those 2 guys are? Shit. That's anyone's guess. Last week, a week ago, Cam Robinson of Elite Prospects said it was Marco Sturm. They're going to hire Marco Sturm. Didn't surprise any of us. Not the best move in the world, I wouldn't think. But wouldn't surprise anybody. But now we're hearing 2 guys. It's down to 2. And all we know about names is that Joe Sacco is out. Elliot Friedman said that. So that leaves Marco Sturm, Jay Leach, Jay Woodcroft, and Mitch Love. Boy, is that lighting your hair on fire, any of those? Of course not. None of these guys are going to. What does worry me, because I'm such a pessimist about this team and this regime, Don Sweeney, is we're sitting here on June 2nd. The Bruins played their last game on April 15th. And on June 2nd, not only do they not have a coach, but they have only just now ruled out their interim coach, Joe Sacco. If it took this long to rule out Joe Sacco, how good can these candidates really be? Like that has to be the question. Like, seriously. This team was dog shit for so long. And I'm not saying this is like all Joe Sacco's fault. He dealt with what he had to deal with, right? The cupboard that was given to him. And that was really bare at the end of the season. But after all that, after what you saw for the last 4 months of the season, 5 months of the season, you sit there and say, yeah, man, I just can't get the Joe Sacco thing out of my head. I really, Joe Sacco, he's got to be a candidate here. All due respect to Joe Sacco, man. I feel for him, sacrificial lamb. He should have been out of the process on April 16th. Like, if we are serious about moving forward as an organization, Joe Sacco was never going to be the head coach for that. Never. So if you're serious about getting someone who will evolve offensively and work with the young guys, because you're going to have a young group here, then Joe Sacco should not have been that guy. And honestly, you should be trying to remove as much as you can from last year's team. You removed half the roster at the trade deadline. You should be removing the entire coaching staff. And yeah, I think you should be removing the guys in the front office as well. But, we can't all get what we want. But the fact that Joe Sacco was still in this race until June the 2nd is pretty embarrassing. Pretty embarrassing. Now only two openings left across the National Hockey League. That's the Bruins and the Pittsburgh Penguins. So Marco Sturm and Jay Woodcroft, we've talked a lot about. Check out the video on the channel. I'll put it in the description where we kind of compared those 2 guys. I've kind of said my piece. If you're looking to evolve offensively, Marco Sturm has a lot of room to evolve. Okay, and no one is banging down the door of Marco Sturm. Would the world be falling down? The sky be falling if Marco Sturm comes in as your head coach? Probably not, but it's probably not a move forward. Jay Woodcroft, I still get really bugged and peeved by the fact that he had McDavid and Draisaitl and didn't get the job done with them. And was so bad to start a season with those guys, they fired him like Jim Montgomery style a month into the season. And the next guy has taken them to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals. Yeah, it's not a good look for me. Now, coaches sometimes get a real nice bump on that second place that they go as NHL head coaches. Okay. Jay Leach, no. Sorry. I don't want anything to do with this. This Bruins assistants, Providence Bruins. I don't want it. Clearly, we need something new as an organization. Clearly, you do. And so that leaves Mitch Love. And I got to say, the more I read on Mitch Love, the more I can buy into a Mitch Love hire. It's not someone you've heard of. But then again, the only person you've really heard of is Marco Sturm. And what does that mean? Right? He's an assistant for the Capitals for Spencer Carberry. He is basically the defensive guy for them, the defensive coordinator, if you will, for the Washington Capitals, which were the number 1 team in the Eastern Conference the whole year. Kind of came out of nowhere to do that. And it was in large part actually thanks to their defense. You weren't really paying attention to that because, Alex Ovechkin was chasing the all-time goal record. But they had a top 10 defense in the league. 279 goals per game. 8th lowest in the NHL. And that was all Mitch Love. He's also part of the Spencer Carberry staff, who Spencer Carberry, coach of the year, man. I mean, the job he did there was incredible. Was also a guy, Carberry, who was a finalist when the Bruins hired Jim Montgomery. And again, I don't think the Bruins' failures of the last year, year and a half, 2 years, are all on Jim Montgomery. But I think if they had to do this over again, they would have picked Spencer Carberry over Jim Montgomery. I think that's very fair to say. Now you can actually get a guy from the Carberry staff. And I'm not hung up on the lack of head coaching experience. I've said that in the past. If a guy is a good fit, like I'll take that over a guy who's just been mid in the NHL. Or a guy who was good in the NHL as a head coach, but had the 2 biggest cheat codes in the league and still couldn't get it done, like Jay Woodcroft. And I know that this Mitch Love thing, if they do hire Mitch Love, it would be the antithesis of what Don Sweeney said he was looking for in someone who could evolve offensively. But so are the rest of these guys. Like, so is Marco Sturm. And you have Mitch Love, a guy who was like the next Don Cherry, potentially. Like, he was a minor league player, somewhere teetering on the line of pest and enforcer. So if you want to buy into like that Bruins way kind of crap, that bullshit that we hear every year of like, oh, this guy's a good Bruin. He's going to mix it up. That's a Bruin. Like, you don't have one of those guys on the roster right now, okay? You don't have a single pest on the roster, and you have one guy who can chuck them, and that's Nikita Zadorov, okay? But if you want to buy into that bullshit, Mitch Love gives you that. Marco Sturm doesn't. Jay Woodcroft doesn't. Jay Leach does not. But Mitch Love does. And again, it goes against what Don Sweeney was saying about needing to evolve offensively. And I'm not saying the Bruins don't need to get better offensively. But when you have a lack of talent like the Bruins have, that they're not going to course correct in one offseason. They're not going to. They need a lot of talent. And if you don't have that, much like the Capitals had, not this past year, but the year before, and you really become, and I was saying this after Montgomery got fired, I was like, the one way they can get into the playoffs is if they become a super structured, almost Scotty Bowman-like defensive team. Like, I'm talking structure next to a neutral zone trap kind of shit. Like, super defensive. Actually, the way the Oilers have been a lot of this postseason. Defensive, physical, a little bit faster. That can make up for something of a lack of offensive talent. Mitch Love has had that everywhere he's been. Everywhere he's been. In the WHL, in the NHL, as an assistant on those staffs, that's what he has brought to teams. And by the way, this doesn't mean his defensemen can't be offensive powers. Okay? You remember the guy the Bruins were looking at a few years ago in a trade? Actually, as recently as last year in the Ullmark trade? Jacob Chychrun? Now you know him. He's one of the best defensemen in the league. He got unleashed under Mitch Love. Like, big time. And some of these other guys for the Capitals were really opening up offensively. And that is the only part of Jim Montgomery's coaching philosophy that I think was really good for the Bruins, was how much the defenseman jumped into the play. Mitch Love brings that. He absolutely brings that. These other guys don't. I know he's not a name that you know. I know he's an assistant coach. But by now, the Bruins just need to be looking for the right guy. Mitch Love, of those 4 guys, is to me the most right. I still like Misha Donskov from the Stars. I'm bummed that they kind of put him to the wayside pretty quickly. But speaking of the Stars, what if the Bruins, they've already waited this long. What if they wait a few more days here? What if they just keep their eyes I think the Bruins and the Penguins should both be doing this, keeping their eyes on what's happening in Dallas. Pete DeBoer just humiliated their franchise goalie in the Western Conference Final. They lost in the conference final for the third year in a row, a team that's pretty dang talented. And they've got a championship window that's still open for a couple of years. They might need a change there because they've got the franchise goalie. They've now got the franchise goal scorer in Mikko Rantanen. They got the franchise defenseman in Miro Heiskanen. They might be looking at this of like we've got to get a different guy in here. Maybe that is Misha Donskov because at this point, the cupboard's pretty bare. And maybe they're like, you know what? This is the guy who's the secret behind this, and he's not going to humiliate our players. It's a little late in the process, but what Pete DeBoer did in that game 5, that's kind of a fireable context. That's kind of a fireable situation there. And Pete has worn out his welcome in a couple different places. He's still one hell of a coach who does not have his name on the Stanley Cup. Like if he suddenly becomes available, the Bruins should make the biggest push imaginable. I don't, like, even from a fit standpoint, I don't even really care. Like, Pete DeBoer is next to being a Hall of Fame coach. And he's just there in the beginning of June. You would be really stupid if you were still looking for a coach to not make a full push for Pete DeBoer. It's a long shot, but it's possible. Like the way that Dallas reacted to that and the hockey world reacted to that. Maybe the hockey world just likes hockey more than Dallas does. Very possible. But the way the hockey world reacted to him pulling Oettinger 7 minutes into that game in a elimination game for the Stars, crazier things have happened. He could be available. So it's been too long to wait anyway. But now that you have Bruins, maybe just give it a couple of days. And if it's not Pete DeBoer, I love Mitch Love. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and get involved in that comment section. Who should be the guy for the Bruins? Should they wait on Pete DeBoer? Am I completely crazy? Please let me know in the comment section below. And be sure to catch us live on YouTube, high noon Eastern time every weekday. And then wherever you get your podcasts as well. Check out the other videos on the YouTube channel, talking the Bruins and this coaching search and everything going on in Boston sports. I'm your host, Cam Stuart. Zach Burke keeps us on the air 5 days a week.